45-year-old Susan Tice lived in Toronto, Canada in 1983. She was a mother of 4 children and worked as a social worker. Her body was found in the upstairs bedroom of her recently purchased home on Grace Street on August 17, 1983. She had moved to Toronto from Calgary in July and separated from her husband, who was living in a downtown townhouse. By the time her body was found by a relative, the mail had piled up outside of her home. She had suffered multiple stab wounds to the chest. An autopsy was unable to determine when exactly her life ended. Police admitted that they had few leads on the case. A detective said at the time, "We have no suspect at all." 4 months later, on December 20th of 1983, 22-year-old Erin Gilmour's body was found in her Toronto apartment. A friend who went to pick her up for a cocktail party found Erin's body. Like Susan Tice, Erin had been stabbed, assaulted, and found in her bedroom. Police canvassed door to door to no avail. Erin was an aspiring clothing designer from a wealthy family. Her father, David Gilmour, had been the business partner of tycoon Peter Monk, co-founder of the mining company Barrick Gold. It was Monk's son who found Erin's body. For years, then decades, investigators knew little about what happened to Susan and Erin, except that they suffered a similar fate. In 2008, advances in DNA technology brought a break, confirming through evidence at the scenes that one man was responsible for what happened to both Susan and Erin. But it would take nearly 15 more years and even greater scientific advances to identify who he was. Recently, via a combination of advanced genetic sequencing, forensic genealogy, and traditional police work that's now regularly cracking open decades-old cases, investigators arrested 60-year-old Joseph George Sutherland from Moosonee, Ontario, Canada, in connection with Susan and Erin's cases. Moosonee is a remote community far removed from the slayings that police allege he committed nearly 40 years ago. Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith, the lead Toronto police investigator, speculated that Sutherland had been waiting for the knock to come at the door. Smith told reporters that a second phase of the investigation must now begin. A painstaking review of Sutherland's whereabouts in the intervening 39 years. Obviously, we're going to look into every possible connection to any possible case throughout Ontario to ensure that he isn't responsible for any other offenses, Smith said. The cases are just the latest advances through genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge process that has breathed new life into old cases all but declared unsolvable. Detective Smith said that the scientific advances were the only way the cases were ever going to be solved. Joseph Sutherland was 22 years old at the time that he took the lives of Susan and Erin. He was never a suspect in the case, nor had he ever been interviewed. He had been living in Toronto at the time, but later moved to Moosonee. A Facebook profile for Sutherland reveals a person going about a seemingly normal life, enjoying the outdoors and requesting recommendations for services like an electrician, while griping with everyday problems. Retired Toronto detective Mark Mendelson said that investigators can also turn to classic techniques to identify any other crimes they believe Sutherland may be responsible for, including photo lineups. If previous cases had eyewitnesses as well as fingerprint analysis, now that Sutherland's fingerprints will be in a centralized system known as AFIS, he said it's also entirely possible that Sutherland never went on to commit other violent acts. But he said there isn't enough statistical data about serial criminals to have an informed discussion about it. The former cop said one thing is certain. It's a clear example of, ain't science wonderful? Sutherland is scheduled to appear in court soon in 2023. One of Erin Gilmour's brothers, Sean McCowan, had this to say about the arrest. The best call I've ever received. This is a day that I, and we, have been waiting almost an entire lifetime for," McCowan said. "For nearly 4 decades, the culprit had been a ghost," said McCowan, adding that his mother, who passed away 2 years ago, never recovered from the loss of her only daughter. She would have been so relieved that there had been an arrest, and so happy that someone will face justice after being anonymous for 39 years, McCowan said. On May 23rd of 1992, a woman's body was found dumped behind a construction shed in North Memorial Drive, just outside of Tulsa, Oklahoma. She was quickly identified as 31-year-old Kim Marlene McVey. Kim had been shot in the head. There were no known witnesses to the crime, and no DNA evidence. No one came forward with useful information, and the case went cold. But then recently, witnesses did come forward. They told police that a man by the name of Tommy Edward Harris confessed to them that he took Kim's life. Kim, Harris, and a few other unnamed individuals were staying in the same house. The house was described as a known drug house. On May 16th of 1992, 7 days before her body was found, a man entered the house to settle a deal that had gone bad. This individual wanted to get his money back. A gun battle then took place. This man took Kim in a headlock and dragged her outside. The man then made demands of Tommy Harris. Harris fired a gun and it struck Kim in the left temple. Harris then dragged her body into the house and later hid her remains behind the shed out back. Tommy Harris was arrested on May 14th of 2020. Tulsa County Sheriff Vic Rigolato said this is a bittersweet moment. Bitter in the fact that Kim McVey still has family. They have been notified, but they're out of state and were unable to be here today. Our hearts certainly go out to them. And sweet in the fact that we now have been able to provide closure to her family. It was years in the making, but again, at the end of the day, justice is sometimes slow-moving, but still happens. The man who entered the house looking for money has since passed away. Kim's family, who did not attend the police briefing, also have not yet made a statement after hearing about the arrest. Rachel Johnson was a single mother who lived in Akron, Ohio in 1991. In March of the same year, she had been in a friend's vehicle when they got a flat tire. They pulled into the parking lot of a convenience store at the corner of Dan Street and Glenwood Avenue. A small faded gray vehicle pulled into the lot behind them. Rachel got into that vehicle and drove off with the man. It is believed that the man offered to take her home. However, later in the day, her body was discovered on Weller Avenue. She was assaulted, stabbed multiple times, and even set on fire after being dumped in the street. Investigators collected DNA evidence from Rachel's body. They entered it into databases, but did not find a match. It was only in 2019, when the Akron Police Department partnered with Advanced DNA, that a match could be made. Advanced DNA is a genetic testing company in Texas that has helped solve a lot of cold cases recently. In March of 2020, 57-year-old Daniel Lee Reese was arrested in connection with the case. His DNA matched the suspect's DNA that was found at the crime scene back in 1991. Reese, who would have been 28 years old at the time of the crime, was booked into the Summit County Jail. He is apparently known to Rachel's family. Reese had been spotted in the same area that she was last seen alive, but he was never looked into during the initial investigation. Reese also lived right across the street from Rachel. After he took her life, he would often spend time with her daughter, who went to live with Rachel's mother. The daughter never expected that this man she knew from childhood was the man who took her mother's life. Detective James Pashelik said that the DNA was the key to solving this case. That's what broke the case. He also said that it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. And in this case, we have.